At a busy railway platform, a man steps onto the track just as a fast-moving train barrels in from the distance. It's late morning at Dahisar Station in Mumbai. Across the track, a man begins crossing toward the opposite platform. He reaches the second rail, then stops. His shoe is stuck between the rail and the gravel bed. The platform officer spots him and starts signaling urgently. As the man moves to free his trapped shoe, a train enters the frame, rapidly approaching as its momentum builds. The officer races forward, trying to guide him toward the platform. The man steps out of the rail channel at the last possible moment, clearing the area just as the train surges through that section of track. Never, ever cross active train tracks or linger between the rails, because the combination of uneven footing, trapped footwear, and high-speed rail traffic creates a hazard that allows no margin for error. Inside a busy workshop, a mechanic works on a massive truck tire, seconds before the entire assembly erupts with sudden force. In a truck service bay in Santiago, Brazil, a mechanic stands near a mounted truck wheel, preparing it for inflation. The space is active, crowded, and full of high-pressure equipment. The truck tire being inflated sits directly beside the crew, towering in size and already showing signs of uneven seating. Without warning, the truck tire ruptures under extreme pressure. A surge of compressed energy bursts through the bay, sending smoke, dust, and equipment outward in an instant. Chairs topple, tools shift, and the force ripples across the workshop floor. A partially seated or improperly secured truck tire can store enough compressed energy to explode without warning, so always use inflation cages, distance tools, and controlled pressure equipment when airing large commercial tires. A worker pushes a rolling trash bin across a crosswalk just as an oncoming vehicle approaches at full speed. On a busy street in China, vehicles move steadily through an intersection. A worker in blue coveralls enters the crosswalk, guiding a large trash bin in front of him. Traffic appears normal, with scooters, sedans, and pedestrians all moving through the area. The worker concentrates on maneuvering the heavy bin, which partially blocks his forward view as he crosses the painted lines. A white SUV approaches the intersection without slowing. The driver drifts off course, attention misaligned with the road ahead. The worker, still advancing the trash bin, reaches the midpoint of the crossing. In a split second, the SUV collides with the trash bin, driving the container off its path and forcing everything in the crosswalk zone to shift abruptly as the vehicle continues through. Never, ever enter a roadway with limited visibility or obstructed sightlines, because even brief driver distraction turns crosswalks into high-risk zones where vehicles and pedestrians can intersect dangerously. On a snowy roadside, two technicians work atop a raised lift when a tension power line snaps them into a sudden, violent motion. In Omsk, Russia, a maintenance truck with a scissor lift is parked beside a snow-covered road. Two workers stand inside the elevated cage, repairing overhead power lines. One worker is bent over, adjusting equipment. The other stands upright, handling a suspended cable. The lift sways slightly in the cold wind, surrounded by parked cars and icy ground. As the cable is repositioned, the tension line recoils with sudden force. The release drives the suspended line downward, causing a powerful jolt that destabilizes the elevated platform. Tools shift, the cage rocks hard to one side, and the sudden motion sends equipment scattering across the snowy roadside below. A tensioned utility line can release extreme mechanical force without warning, so always secure yourself with proper fall arrest equipment and anchor points when working at elevation. A forklift edges into traffic with its metal forks extended, right as a scooter approaches at speed. On a city street, a forklift emerges from a side lot, its forks lifted outward and protruding far beyond the vehicle's frame. The operator looks toward the main road, preparing to merge. Traffic flows steadily, sedans, delivery trucks, and a single scooter advancing up the lane. The scooter rider, focused on the open path ahead, does not appear to concentrate on what's ahead of him on the roadway. As the forklift rolls forward, its elevated forks project directly into the scooter's lane. With the forks positioned high and extending outward, the scooter's front end meets the obstruction, causing it to jolt sharply off its path. The sudden impact redirects the scooter's motion across the pavement, while the forklift remains stationary in the merge zone. Never ever operate or maneuver a forklift on public roads with raised, extended, or unsecured forks, because protruding steel arms create an invisible hazard that approaching traffic cannot reliably detect or avoid. A worker climbs onto a tanker to inspect its hatch without seeing the live power line just inches above his head. In a yard beside a roadway, a tanker truck sits parked while a worker climbs onto its curved top. He steps along the narrow walkway toward the hatch, focusing on his task. Trees sway behind him, and overhead wires stretch across the sky, close enough to create a hidden electrical zone around the tanker's highest point. The worker straightens his posture, unaware that the clearance between him and the energized line has nearly vanished. As he rises to full height, the tanker's upper walkway enters the energized field surrounding the overhead conductor. A sudden electrical arc flashes toward the tanker's highest point, producing a burst of energy that jolts the entire structure. The metal surface vibrates sharply. Equipment shifts across the walkway, and the surge radiates outward across the yard. Never ever climb onto tankers or elevated surfaces beneath live overhead lines, because even momentary proximity to high-voltage conductors can create arc hazards powerful enough to cause accidents from height. On a muddy roadside work site, a crane lowers a heavy steel part, while one worker fights it with his bare hands. Beside a service truck with a small crane, chains hold a bulky metal component hanging just above the ground. The boom is slewed low and close to two workers, who are trying to help by pushing the load into position instead of using proper rigging control. There's no exclusion zone, no taglines, just bodies, boots, and a moving hook. As the operator adjusts the boom, the suspended load suddenly shifts out of alignment. The steel component swings through its arc with increasing momentum, driven by the crane's motion and the uneven ground. The load sweeps across the work zone, its path cutting directly through the space. Equipment and material scatter as the heavy component continues to move unpredictably beneath the boom. Never ever stand under or against a suspended load. Even a small crane movement can turn hanging steel into a swinging hammer that knocks down anyone in its path. Keep workers out of the drop and swing zone. Use taglines to guide the load, and stop the lift if anyone drifts into the red area. A man crawls under his pickup to fix a fuel sensor just as the jack holding the truck suddenly slips. In a small driveway, the pickup's rear end is lifted with a single floor jack. Tools, hoses, and parts are scattered around as the man leans deep under the truck bed, reaching for the fuel system. To support the lift, he slid thick wooden blocks over the tire as a backup, simple but solid wedges positioned to catch the truck if anything shifts. While he's still underneath, the jack loses its hold, and the truck settles downward with sudden force. The bed drops onto the wooden blocks, which absorb the load and stop the descent instantly. The blocks hold firm under the weight, preventing the rear of the truck from collapsing any further. Never ever rely on a single jack to support a vehicle. A jack can slip without warning, turning the entire frame into a crushing hazard if no secondary support is in place. Use jack stands, wheel chocks, and solid secondary supports. These simple safeguards are the reason he walked away without injury. Inside a busy tire shop stacked with wheels, a young worker walks across the floor, straight toward an open service pit. The shop is crowded, tires piled high, tools scattered, and an uncovered maintenance pit running down the center of the floor. The lighting is bright on the walls but dim inside the pit, making the opening blend into the patterned tile. A young worker carries a large white container as he walks near the edge. As he approaches the pit's edge, the unmarked opening blends completely into the dim floor section. With no guardrails or cover, the container he's carrying tips forward first, dropping straight into the pit. The sudden shift sends nearby tools sliding as the container lands below. Tires atop a nearby shelf wobble and roll free as the disturbance ripples across the crowded shop. Never ever leave an inspection pit uncovered or unmarked. An unprotected floor opening becomes an invisible drop zone the moment a worker's view is obstructed. Guardrails, pit covers, bright edge markings, and strict access control prevent falls in cramped workshops like this one. Workers crowd around a truck, lifting a massive sheet bundle, when the entire stack suddenly gives way. On a narrow street, several workers stand at the rear of a truck loaded with tall metal panels. They're trying to unload a huge flexible sheet, lifting it by hand without support, spacing, or control. Others stand directly underneath, pushing up from below as the load bends and sways. As the group pulls the sheet out, the unsupported stack behind it shifts. The weight rolls forward, collapsing toward the other side of the truck bed and sending dust and panels spilling across the narrow street as the bundle loses all stability. A leaning, unsecured stack of panels can tip with the slightest pull, turning a simple unload into a falling material hazard. Stabilize stacked materials, use mechanical lifting, and keep people out from under flexible loads. Don't forget to share what you learned today in the comments. Your insight could save a life. Take care.